You've got the Mac and Mac guys here on a Thursday on Birds 365. Show number what, John?
Ooh, 717. I'm gonna go.
Close 718. Only missed by one. That's pretty
Wow,
good
that's
out
not
of you.
bad. That's not bad.
Damn close. You got that right. Two more this week, and then next week is free agency frenzy. But yes, the Eagles are already putting pieces in place, making moves to be ready for free agency come Monday. And I want to personally thank them for not making the decision till like late afternoon that they and Avonte Maddox are parting ways. Usually these moves come down at 10:05 in the morning, right after we sign off here on Birds 365. So it didn't come down till late in the afternoon to Avonte Maddox. As of right now, is an ex-Eagle. No great surprise, John. We knew what his cap number was going to be for this upcoming season for a guy who is oftentimes watching from the sidelines rather than out there actually playing. So we knew there was a good chance that Avonte Maddox was going to be a cap casualty. But all the reporting said from both sides they would not be adverse to a revisiting after he hits the free agent market if there are no better offers out there, if the Eagles are willing to give him a decent paycheck, that there is a chance for a reunion. As a betting man, I would probably bet against rather than bet on, but just the fact that they parted on pretty good terms is not a bad thing. It keeps them at least in the potential mix for a reunion with Avonte Maddox. Talented player, John, but your number one ability has to be availability, and that was just not the case for Avonte Maddox all too often.
Yeah, old Chip Kelly, best ability is availability. Can't make the club in the tub, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, the Eagles like Avonte Maddox as a player. They really do. So I wouldn't slam the door. As you mentioned, it kind of depends on where other teams say him. I think if he gets 2 years somewhere, yeah, he's probably going to go. But is anybody going to give him 2 years after the previous 2 seasons where he's been limited to 13 games total? So, he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. But when you talk about his impact on the Eagles, I mean, that position was a disaster without him.
Yeah.
A disaster. I mean, they ran through 7, 8 bodies trying to replace him. And, when he finally did come back, he didn't play well at the end of the season. So I think that's on people's minds as well. But look, I think he pushed. He probably came back too soon. He probably shouldn't have come back. And that's a desirous trade as well, at least from the coaching staff's perspective. So I wouldn't slam the door. If it's 1 year, 7 million, prove it, incentives, maybe a couple incentives in there. Why not? Why not? I mean, they could fix that position if they get lucky and he stays healthy. Otherwise, as you saw last year, you can say Isaiah Rodgers, blah, blah, blah. He hasn't played for a year. He played outside in Indianapolis. Now, he looks like a slot corner because he's 5'10", about 170. And the reason he didn't play in the slot in Indianapolis was more Kenny Moore's really good slot corner. So he had to play outside. So, Zach McPherson coming off with torn Achilles. People are like, well, maybe Zach can take over. New position, torn Achilles. Can't count on that. They've tried it with Bradbury. They ruined Bradbury with that move. I firmly believe that. Disastrous. Eli Ricks.
And let me just jump in there. If that's the case, and you may be right, I'm not denying your theory here. Shame on Bradbury. He's a veteran guy, and you can't go in and take a couple of snaps in the slot and then get back outside and not watch your career fall apart. Come on,
well, I would
that
like
more on the player than the Eagles.
Well,
Bradbury's decline is on Bradbury more than the Eagles. You want to say the Eagles gave him a helping hand?
They gave him a push. They gave him a push.
That's fair. That's fair.
Look, I thought the move. I looked at, I gave Sean Desai the stink eye when he was talking about it. I'm like, really? I don't know. I think it's easy to say he's a 6'2", outside zone corner and you're playing him in the slot, I think it's easy to say, oh, he should do better. He should be. I mean, coaches always say, I got to put players in better positions, right? That is the definition of putting a player in a poor position. So, should a veteran player handle it better? All right, I'll buy that a little bit. But that's why I'm not completely, a lot of people want to turn the page on James Bradbury, and they will if they can get a better option. But I'd be interested to see him play with Vic Fangio. I really would. Because I know Vic's going to use him correctly. I know that at the bare minimum. And then, if he can't play then he's done. All right. And then you can turn the page and go to Ringo or Ricks or whatever. But I wouldn't mind seeing him play with Vic Fangio. So I got off on a tangent there, but back to Avonte.
But before you do, about Bradbury playing, and we probably undersold this. McMullen, McDonald, all Eagles reporters and the like, when they made the move, it didn't really make a lot of sense because we knew what Bradbury was. We knew what his traits were. We knew where he had his most success, outside in a zone. Yeah, we all knew it. And okay, wait, they're going to put him in the slot? And my thought process was just, he's coming off such a good season. They think he can do anything. They think he's that good that they can just throw him anywhere and he'll just thrive because he's James Bradbury. Now that looking back at it on 2020 hindsight, you know what it was? And I know Sean Desai got his walking papers, and Matt Patricia got his little moment in the sun, and he got his walking paper. They knew all the replacements weren't good enough. They looked at everybody they had and said, uh-oh, we're screwed. There is no Avonte Maddox in this group here. We're in trouble. Do we think Rick is good enough? No. Would that be a probable mistake? Yeah. Sidney Brown's ready to step in and play slot corner? Yeah, no. But we might have to try. And they looked at the assembled defensive backs and said, who do we think would be the least worst of the group? Well, let's start with Bradbury. And they put him in there, and they saw he couldn't do it. And then here comes the spinning door of other options they had, and none of them worked.
To me, it even predates that a little bit because it predates Avonte's injury and it predates Zach's injury. So, no, I'm going to blame that one on Sean Desai. And at the time we said, and I remember I asked Sean, I said, typically, because I try to get coaches talking by not saying players' names because players they're always going to protect players. So I asked them the question. I framed it. Typically, slot corners are undersized, short area quickness. Got to deal with a lot of option routes. And I remember saying to him, he said, "Yeah, that you're right, but I don't believe that. I think other guys can fit in there." And he proved true to his word because he not only used Bradbury, he used Ricks inside, who's 6'2", and is an outside corner. And you mentioned Sidney Brown; he used the safety inside. Mm-hmm. Now, at some point, the injury started to pile up, so some of that he had to do. But he started cross-training Bradbury before anybody got hurt. And it never made it, and not a lot. And I think we even lauded him at the time. I said, well, I like cross-training people in case something happens.
Right.
But it was strange. It was strange. And in hindsight, as you said, and it is hindsight, and I freely admit that, in hindsight, it was a freaking disaster. And should he have known that? Probably. What is Ricks doing in the slot other than necessity? Brown, necessity. None of them are slot corners.
Roby off the scrap heap, lousy.
We can all lie to each other and say, oh, they can play in the slot. And people do it. Flores uses Josh Metellus. I always talk about Flores because he, and that guy is different, but it's a different position as his defense.
Right, and his
I'm looking at this particular defense. And yeah, I mean, they could use Avonte Maddox. So getting back to what I said, if they can get a 1-year deal done, but I think that's unlikely. We'll see how it shakes out.
Because they probably already had the discussions about him.
Yeah, exactly.
Back with a redone contract, and they couldn't come to an agreement. Yeah. Maddox still has a higher value for himself than the Eagles have for him right now. So it's unlikely. It's just not impossible because sometimes a guy's really hurt. He ticked off. He's like, screw this. I'm never playing for this guy again, this town again. Apparently, that was not the case. So you just leave the door open. Do I think he's walking back to it? Probably not. And you mentioned the guy who's probably going to, if you said Jody Mack, right now, give me a guess who's playing the most in the slot for the Eagles this upcoming year. And you can use an all-inclusive, he's not here yet guy. I'm still not taking. I think they're going to give Isaiah Rodgers every chance to grab that position. That's one of those Howie outthinking the league type plays. He was out there available for anybody. Had to miss the entire year. I hope they're staying. I hope Dom's got his license plate number readily available in his Rolodex to be able to keep an eye on him, that he doesn't screw the Eagles the same way he screwed the Colts. He's a talented player. Like you said, played more outside than inside, played inside in college, and has the physical traits to play inside. My guess would be he's going to play more slot corner than anybody else on the Eagles this upcoming year.
Yeah, well, as it's set up right now, but I do think there's a potential the Eagles could bring somebody else in. But yeah, if the players available right now, I'd agree with you. I'm surprised how many people look at his history in Indianapolis and say, well, he's an outside corner. He played outside in Indianapolis. Well, I'm like, come on, peel the onion back a little bit. Understand Kenny Moore was, top 5 slot corner. So they're not taking Kenny Moore off the field. So they're having some, that's like saying when Avonte Maddox started outside early in his career, he can't play in the slot.
Right.
Stupid. I mean, what I don't get, I've seen it. And the reason I've seen it so many times. Well, he played outside in Indianapolis. Yeah. So obviously he projects inside. Avonte Maddox played safety as a rookie. Remember that? Nobody said, well, he wasn't ultimately going to be a nickel corner. That's why they drafted him. Then they played him outside, and Howie made the Aaron Glenn comparison, which was unfair. Your guy, Aaron Glenn from his Jets days. Very good player, undersized. Not a lot of Aaron Glens who can hold up like Aaron did back in the day at outside corner. And he was bad outside. And then they ultimately moved him inside, and he was really good. Hopefully that happens with Rodgers. So I don't get why people are looking at his snap count. Oh, he played 30 snaps in the slot. Kenny Moore, look him up. Kenny Moore. That's why he played 30 snaps in the slot. That doesn't mean he won't play it here.
I need you to look up somebody for me. I watch enough Dolphin games. I know the player. I just don't know him in depth. The Miami Dolphins yesterday released linebacker casualty guy Jerome Baker. He was third on the Dolphins in tackles this year. He got hurt right at the end of the year, and he had surgery on his wrist. So the Dolphins released him with an injury designation. I don't know if that means he won't be ready. I haven't checked out any reporting on whether this is something that's going to keep him past the start of camp. But wrist surgery sounds like something you can rehab from in a couple of months and be ready to go well before the season starts. We're in March. Should certainly be good to go by September, and maybe even by the time camp opens up. If we had a chance to get Vic Fangio on the phone, we could ask him, what do you think of Jerome Baker as your linebacker this past year? Vic had him for a year in Miami. We know the Eagles need an upgraded linebacker. We know they're not going to pay for, not that there truly is a top of the market off-ball linebacker these days. They just don't exist in the league. They don't have those kind of payments for linebacker. But he's probably a middle-of-the-road, legit starting linebacker, better than the guys the Eagles brought in this year, even though Howie seems to be in love with what Cummings did this year. I didn't quite see it the same way he did, but Jerome Baker could be looked at as an upgrade. How'd PFF rank him this year in the linebacker rating?
Let me look that up. I mean, he's young. He's still 27. He signed a big contract. That's part of it.
Second contract, yeah. That's why Miami released him. He's a cap casualty.
Yeah, 13 million a year or something. So they thought highly of him at one point. And as you mentioned, he was one of those guys that got hurt late. Remember Miami had all those injuries.
Got crushed.
They got destroyed. He was okay. his grade last year, but he was better in coverage. So that's a positive for me. Because the Eagles need
He
coverage
had
linebackers.
2 interceptions last year.
Yeah.
And who led the Eagles in interceptions? And what, they have 3? Did
Yeah,
anyone on
Reed.
the Eagles have
I think
3
Reed.
last year?
I think Reed maybe. I'd have to look it up.
His 2 interceptions might have tied him for the most interceptions.
Yeah, well, the Eagles didn't have
last year.
the Eagles didn't have a lot of playmakers, to say the least, on defense last year. That's one of the reasons people keep talking about Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, because, hey, why not? The guy made plays, but I think the Eagles can do better. We'll see what they do with safety and free. There's a lot of safeties available in free agency, but yeah. But now the problem with Baker, and you got to worry about health, as you mentioned. He had surgery in January. You would think he'd be back by, but are you going to be back for the off season and a new team? That affects it when you're shipped and off. So
Yeah, but he
I
was
got
in
to,
Fangio's defense last year. And
yeah,
he's
that
stepping
helps.
into the same
But,
defensive
but, but
coordinating system that he played in last year.
that certainly helps. But what I was going to bring about next with that, a lot of guys didn't like it down there.
Right.
So is he
Oh,
one of
if
those
he doesn't like
guys?
Vic, see you later, bye. You
Yeah.
shut the
Is
negotiations
he
down immediately.
is he one of those guys, or is he, was he happy? Because there were
Right.
guys that were happy. But I think, and I say this all the time, and I mentioned it on the show, people assume because somebody has a relationship with somebody else, it's always a positive, and that might bring it. Sometimes it's a negative.
True.
From both standpoints, the player standpoint, the coach's standpoint. Sometimes it's a negative. Like I say, the same thing with top 30 visits. When everybody assumes they're positive. They're not always positive. Sometimes it's a negative. And so there's, but he's I would say he's a decent player. And if he's healthy, he'd be an upgrade over what the Eagles had.
That's all I'm saying is Fangio had him. If Fangio likes him, that's good. If he likes Fangio, good point by you, Johnny Mac. It might be the exact opposite. That's good. He's coming off an injury. He's probably going to be in a price range that the Eagles will be willing to play at. Now, he might not. Maybe somebody else loves him. Maybe somebody is going to step in and give him close to $10 million per. And if that's the case, the Eagles aren't going to pay $10 million for a linebacker, so that just discounts it immediately. But just was interested the fact that he did sign. It's one of those, and this is again something that Howie's good at. He would not be considered a compensation free agent signing because he was released. Now, on the flip side, the Eagles aren't going to get credit for Avonte Maddox either because he also was released. He's not a free agent. He was a released player. When I saw that name today, it intrigued me because it is a position of need for the Eagles, and he does have a Vic Fangio connection.
Overall, you mentioned PFF, so overall, Nicholas Morrow was 36th out of the off-ball linebackers. He kind of fell off. He was doing much better earlier.
Yeah, he was in the top 10, wasn't he?
Through like the first 5-6 games, he was playing really well. Then it kind of fell off the table. Zach Cunningham was 37th, so they're right next to each other, 36, 37. Jerome Baker was 41.
Wow.
But as a coverage linebacker, Jerome Baker was much better than both Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham. So in that particular aspect, and I think that's very valuable to the Eagles at this point, he was very good. He was very good. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, top 20 coverage linebacker. So I think that's kind of a fit for what the Eagles want.
Just tossing a name out there, not saying he's a must get or anything like that. He's just a in the mix free agent linebacker who Vic Fangio will have a strong opinion about. Chances are one way or the other. I got a strong opinion about our next guest. He always comes ready to lay it out there for us. He's looking wide awake too. Damn, I'm still half asleep.
Yeah, I know. I got seasonal depression. Are we ever going to see non-rainy weather again?
It's supposed to be 60 tomorrow. We shall see if we actually get some spring-like weather. We will spring out to Fox 29 next. The sports director, Scott Grayson, joins us here on Birds 365.